Hello, I'm Lyle at UltiMAK, and this is the Kalashnikov KP-9 pistol, blowback 9mm. We're going to install our new M19 optic mount to it, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. This opens up like some of the crinks. Remove what I would normally call the bolt carrier, but it's all one piece because it's a blowback. That's the bolt. It even has a built-in little safety doohickey in there, which is pretty clever. But we won't get into the function of the pistol. We'll get into the installation of the mount. It comes apart like a standard AK, except we can't call this the gas tube, can we? Because there's no gas system. What will we call it? I don't know. I'll call it the bolt carrier extension housing tube. How about that? Except it's not a carrier. Anyway, some of these, this is the lever that has to unlock to move the fore end cap forward. If you're familiar with AKs, bear with me because you'll already know a lot of this stuff. I've got my Leatherman tool. I'm going to try to pry that forward. And it's sort of working. Some of these are really loose and others are really tight. So this one's a little bit on the tight side. Get a punch and try to bump that forward. There it went. And now I'll move the fore end cap to the front, and the whole handguard just popped right out. These KP9s do use a standard AKM lower handguard, so that makes things a little simpler if you're interested in ever swapping. So the UltiMAK mount is attached directly to the barrel using these clamps. This barrel is a smaller diameter than most AKs, and so we're going to use these shims. But first, I'm going to do a sort of trial run here. I'm going to sort of position the clamps to coincide with the holes in the top of the mount, somewhat, roughly. Holding everything in place. That's about where those are going to want to be. Okay, fine. So I'm going to pull that back out of there. I'm going to drop the bottom shim in place. And move this back into position. Suppose I didn't have to do that in 2 steps, because I can still move these clamps where they need to be. And right about there, maybe back just a little bit. I'm going to slide there. Now, this needs to go back where it came from. Gonna make sure these are in the right place. Just needs to come back slightly. That's easily done. Okay. I'm gonna try to knock this back into position. Good. Second shim on top. Centered right to left. And as long as it's underneath, or rather, somewhat centered over the clamps there, between the clamps. And this will drop right in. And now come the screws. That one started easily. This one wants that clamp to come forward slightly, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to see if I can okay. There's one. There's two. We supply 5 screws in case you lose one or goof one up somehow. Some people have called and said, hey, I got my mount all together, but there's a screw left over. Where's that supposed to go? That's just an extra. Okay, so right now I'm positioning the mount. I've got it back off this part, which would be the gas block. I've got it backed off slightly. I've got it forward of the rear sight block slightly, so it's roughly centered in there. And I'm going to just start tightening screws till they start to firm up slightly. And then I'm going to look at the bottom of the clamp relative to the bottom of the mount. See, this one's up in a little farther than that one. So I'm going to try to keep those equal somewhat from side to side. It's not critical. You just want to have them somewhat equal. The point you're trying to avoid is to have one side of the clamp hard up against the mount on one side and then you have a gap on the other. We want the clamps to not bottom out up against the mount, so there's a little gap. You can't see, but as long as the clamp extends below the mount equally on both sides, you got the right clearance in there. Suppose I could get into the mechanics of that, but if the clamp is bottomed out up against the mount, it can provide no more clamping force, you see. Some people expect like a scope ring cap needs to be closed to the scope ring base. Well, no, that's not the point. It should be a little space between the two pieces on both sides. This is kind of the same thing. Alright, so we're getting to where this is tightening up. I'm going to double check the position of the mount right to left, front and back, and that looks pretty good to me. So before I finish torquing everything down, I'll do a trial fit of the bolt. And that drops right in. You're fine. So we'll go ahead and tighten these screws all the way. Again, paying attention to how far the clamp is drawn inside the mount there on each side. I'm just going to go back and forth, go down here, back and forth. Now it's getting tight. And some people write in asking for torque specs. Well, first of all, the SAE Society of American Engineers publishes torque specs for all SAE threads. These are an 832 thread, steel in steel. So you can look that up, or you can go by our highly technical torque specification, which is good and tight. And that's getting pretty good and tight. Using this wrench, you can't go wrong really. Just get it good and tight using that wrench. Make sure the wrench is seated into the screw head all the way while you're torquing on it. Support it with your thumb like that. I got that cap flying open on me. Okay. That's good and tight. So let's go ahead and do our final test. Positioning looks centered this way, more or less centered that way. Drops into place. Now we can put in the recoil spring. This retaining pin no longer does anything, but obviously you want to have it locked down into its detent. And that'd be the finished product, finished installation. You're ready for an optic on there. This gives you a much lower Picatinny rail than any other mount could possibly give you. And we're going to go ahead and mount an aim point on here, and we'll show you the co-witnessing arrangement. And here we have a micro sight. We're going to go ahead and pop it on here. Doesn't have to be this particular model. There are several that will co-witness. Has to be the lowest optic you can get. But anyway, the micro type sights really work well with these small AKs. And there it is. I even have the optic adjusted to coincide pretty well with the iron sights. And this much lower rail that UltiMAK provides gives you the ability to co-witness your iron sights. And we'll show you the sight picture. Obviously, when you're shooting with the optic sight, you'll be looking over the top of your irons. But if you line up your irons, and if your irons and your optic are both zeroed for the same distance and wind, you can line up your irons in the bottom of the sight and you'll see the red dot perched atop your front sight post. It's not how you would necessarily use. You wouldn't use both sight systems simultaneously. Like I say, you'd look over the top of your irons to use your red dot. But there they are. Both systems are available at a moment's notice. You're ready to go to the range.